Hello and welcome to Diego C. Palace. Yes, if you need your superstar to be safeguarded, protected from unwanted approaches, from clubs up north, in London, or anywhere else, if you want your superstar at your football club to be protected, you need to have in place the professionals. Dun, 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 dun. At CP, at Crystal Palace, we have the professionals to safeguard unwanted approaches that are made towards one of our superstars, of course, Uncle Marc Guehi. Now, professionals at Crystal Palace, back in the day, it was Bowden Doyle. But now we have Dougie Freeman and Steve Parish. They are the professionals, and they won't contemplate allowing any football club, even the most wealthiest football club in the world, to come down south, to come down at South London and try and pull a fast one. It's not going to happen. But Newcastle fans, hear me out. As a football fan, and only as a football fan, of course, never owned a business, never owned a football club, never bought, sold a football player in my life. This is how I see it, just as a mere football fan. First and foremost, the most important. We're talking about Newcastle United here, of course. It's a football club that when their away fans come down to Selhurst Park and they stand in the Arthur Wade stand, by means of the amount of support that they have, the Newcastle away crowd, it's just massive. They bring it. They really bring it to Selhurst Park. That's what I think when I think Newcastle. What are their fans like when they come down to my Selhurst Park as a football fan? You've got to hands up, respect it. I've also worked many decades, not years, decades, with a few Geordie fans. And they know their football. And they understand how their football club, Newcastle United, is just needed to be awoken. And never really understood that, really, even by listening and feeling the Newcastle away fans coming to Selhurst Park or having worked with them. But until I came across YouTube, content creators in YouTube, I'm not going to mention the name of the channel or the two gentlemen that work on them, or one of them does most of the work. But they know who they are. And you get what I call the pulse on Newcastle United. And I remember watching and listening to what they had to say about Newcastle United. And to go and get the pulse, that's what I call it, just to get the pulse of how they feel about their football club. And I could see them uploading their content back in the day when they had a different owner, that they didn't invest in their football club. And also they had Steve Bruce as the manager. And during their live content creating, I could see that their sort of hairline would recede by the minute. It would literally go back live. So I think the channel that I'm talking about, you know who I'm talking about. Absolutely wonderful, giving me the pulse. And also the community inside of that channel. You could tell that some of the comments there were Newcastle United fans that were considerably older than me, and they had been going to Newcastle, watching them possibly in the 70s and even probably beyond in the 60s. You could tell by what they wrote. So they knew the fabric of their own football club and where it was then and where it should be. Of course, now Newcastle United have got new owners, and it's established that it's the most wealthiest football club in the world. So I'm sure they have professional people in there. From what I can see from Newcastle United, they've re-signed their extension to Eddie Howe, a very good coach and manager. Personally, I think he should be the England manager now. I don't think the England manager should not be anyone else in England but Eddie Howe. And I mean to say that is because the England manager should be an Englishman, or a Scotsman, or a Welshman, or a man from Northern Ireland. In the future, it may even be a woman that has won everything and everything. So we could be going down that road as well. And why not? But for me, it should be a British person in England running the England first squad. And that right now, it should be Eddie Howe. But I think about it, within 2 years ago, he extended his contract, which probably makes him way out of budget with approach from the FA. And then subsequently, from extending Eddie Howe's contract, now they've got new structure in place because Amanda's left. And so something's going on there. They're finding their feet. So the new structure at Newcastle, with their existing manager Eddie Howe, with an extended contract now, have looked to approach to obtain our uncle Marc Guehi. Now, Newcastle United fans, that's how I view your football club. So I hope you kind of see where I'm coming from as an outsider looking at you lot. But there's another thing which I'd like you to be aware of. Marc Guehi at the moment at Crystal Palace is not only a centre-back, is not only a left-back, in my opinion. He can play as a defensive midfielder as well. And if you look at his goals that he scored for Crystal Palace, the man knows where the goal's at as well. If he gets to go up and go up there, just a second. You're not just getting a defender. You're getting a defender that can play in different positions. And I expect that's why Eddie Howe is interested in him. Very interested in him indeed. The second thing is Marc Guehi at Crystal Palace, make no doubt about it. He is inspiring the next generation of young men and young women, especially those that are playing in this position. There are only Crystal Palace women that are champions, that go and see Crystal Palace men and they watch Marc Guehi and they play in that particular position where Marc plays. They'll be saying, I can do that. You know what? I can actually do better than him. I'm going to show it. Playing for the women. They're in the under-21s, playing for Darren Powell. And they watch Marc Guehi play. They'll be saying to Darren Powell, look, I could do better than him. Just let me get on that pitch. Marc Guehi, Newcastle fans, is inspiring the next generations of players. And for Marc Guehi, how does he respond to it? I've never spoken to him, never had a conversation with him. Yes, I've had a polite, I asked him for a selfie, and he duly, timely, and politely allowed me to have a selfie with him last season. But that's it. So I've never spoken to him. But from what I hear of how Marc Guehi conduct themselves within the structure at Crystal Palace, Newcastle fans, this is very important. How he conducts himself at the football club with the staff, with the players that he plays with, and how he connects with the football fans at Crystal Palace is that what he does, he just does it in his stride. He does it to his best of, quoting his words, to the best of his ability. And looking at him as just as a football fan, the gentleman looks so humble. But when he's wearing that football gear and he's on that pitch, he's like, I need to do this. I can do this, and there's no one that's going to stop me from doing this. And that's what he does. He delivers on that football pitch. So I expect that's why Eddie Howe is in for Marc Guehi. Now comes what I want to say to Newcastle United fans. Is the mannerism, the mechanics of how I think the people upstairs from Eddie Howe came down to South London and made that first bid. I'm going to make it sweet and short as I can. Imagine yourself as a second car hand dealer, and you've got your car auction, say at Wandsworth. Don't know if it's still there, running on the Wandsworth Bridge. And then you also got a punter that comes in, and he has a little display somewhere where he shows his cars and sells his cars. And he goes to the car auction at Wandsworth on the bridge, and he sees a Mark II Escort, and he nicks it. He gets it for around 3,200. Takes it back home to his garage, gives someone his score, a little tongue over there to somebody else, brings it up. He ends up spending up to and bringing the whole expenditure to about 4,000 quid now worth on the market value. Then he puts it out there for sale, and then someone from up north comes down and says, look at that Escort Mark II. I'll give you £2.5 grand for it. £2.5 grand. That's sort of what's just happened, in my opinion. When I, as a Crystal Palace fan and nothing more, when I saw that first bid, when I heard the mechanics of it, of course I don't know for sure because I don't know anyone at the football club, but the very first approach, the value of it and the mechanism, how they approached it, I said to myself, whoa, is this Newcastle United? For real? So Newcastle fans, I need you to understand that. That's how I saw it as a Crystal Palace fan. Respect your football club, respect your fan base, absolutely. But the mechanics of how you approach Crystal Palace to get the man, I was like, right? So just look back to see what I just said as that car dealer that's brought a car in a car auction, brought it up to spec, and then somebody comes down from up north and says, I'm not even going to give you what you paid for it before you did it up. Come on. Right. So, for me, Newcastle United fans, your football club has a good manager that, in my opinion, should be the England manager. He should be the England manager today. Not because I want you to lose your manager, no. It's because I think pound for pound, Eddie Howe is the best manager in England. He is, on paper, by all means, the most successful English manager in the Premier League. Excuse me. It's not because I don't want you to lose your manager, no. It's because I think he is that good. He's good enough to manage England. And I mean that. But what I can't get my head around is that on one hand, you've got Newcastle United, the most wealthiest club in the world. And then you've got Crystal Palace, and they have an asset. And that asset is Marc Guehi, which I think he still has just over 2 years of contract still with him to run. I could be wrong. So you got Newcastle United, Crystal Palace. Wealthiest club in the world, Crystal Palace. A well-run, structured football club. And they come in for that asset, and they're kind of like, I'm trying to put this diplomatically, and the only way I could put it diplomatically without sounding rude is to echo the words of Steve Parish when he had that Sky Sports interview, where he said, quote, from Steve Parish, quote, if you want a superstar, you need to pay superstar money, unquote. That's what Steve Parish said on that Sky Sports. And for me, that is what I call a shot back from Crystal Palace, a shot back at the bow in naval terms. Just on the bow, about 20 yards off. Keep off the grass. Now, I'm going to wrap it up. Do I think it's going to end there? No, of course not. You've got to respect that there's not just Newcastle. There is other very successful Premier League clubs out there. Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United. In London, we've got Arsenal, we've got Chelsea. West Ham are having I think, a very good transfer window. As an example, Tottenham, I'm not too sure. I think they've got issues there. But it's a massive club there. But it cannot be, I don't not expect other Premier League clubs to come in for the likes of Marc Guehi. And it could well be that it will end up at the end of the month that Marc Guehi might end up going to Newcastle. But I mean, no doubt that the professionals, sorry, I'm still living in the 80s. What is wrong with me? If you know, you know. At CP, we have the professionals, Dougie and Steve Parish. And I'm in no doubt that if Marc Guehi or Joachim Andersen, I expect after the beginning of the Premier League, it actually starts tomorrow. I think it's Fulham against Manchester United. I don't think it's at Craven Cottage. I think it's at Old Trafford. But whatever. After the first weekend of the Premier League, I'm in no doubt that Newcastle will be in for JP, John Philippe Mateta, as well as Joachim Andersen and also Marc Guehi. They'll probably want the three of them. But this time next week. But I expect that Steve Parish at Crystal Palace and the other professional, Dougie Freeman, they will do what needs to be done to ensure that the interests of, number one, the club is there from a business perspective. And secondly, and I would say it's just as important because of the mannerism of how Marc Guehi has conducted himself from the very first moment that he came into Crystal Palace. And he was managed by one of the coaches at the time. I think it was Paddy, who's part of our existing coaching staff, and Oliver Glasner. So the interests of Marc Guehi will be safeguarded as well, whether he remains at Crystal Palace or whether he moves on to a new chapter in his career. I'm sure that the professionals of at CP, Dougie Freeman and Steve Parish will look to preserve those two entities, if you like, the safeguarding Marc Guehi's interest and the interest of the brand, Crystal Palace. I don't want Marc Guehi to leave, but as I said earlier on, I'm not surprised in the least that a massive club like Newcastle United and their fan base would be interested. So the last thing I want to say to Newcastle United fans is, don't just look at Marc Guehi as a defender, because he's so much more of that. He doesn't just play in one position. That's the reason why I expect your manager Eddie Howe wants him, because he can play him in different positions because of the injuries that you had to incur last season. For goodness sake, who knows what you might have to incur this season. And more importantly, you're not just getting a footballer, you're getting a considerable, as Parish said, a superstar asset that will be added to your payroll at Newcastle United. So if he does end up at your football club, Newcastle United fans, you're not just getting a defender, you're getting a superstar. I hope Marc Guehi doesn't leave. What an amazing role model he is, and I'm sure he'll continue to be. And I'm going to end on this. When he plays for England, his uncle Marc, he's inspiring all young English men and young English women to play football. He's our uncle. There you go. So Newcastle fans, I hope you've enjoyed this upload. If you are a football fan from another club, hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe at Diego C. Palace. And I'll leave you with this. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you for watching. Take care.